They speak of the Zagros peaks, ancient, unforgiving, where shadows cling longer and the earth itself breathes unease. For centuries, whispers have echoed down from those heights. Whispers of Kār-i-Ātash, the skyfire drake, a beast of myth breathing divine wrath, leaving only ash and terror in its wake. But fear distorts the truth. When the scorch marks smell not of brimstone but of something sharp, chemical. When the tremors feel less like godly anger and more like something immense stirring beneath the rock. When the tracks found are not of legend but of flesh and bone. What ancient reality sleeps beneath the skin of myth? What forgotten memory waits to be unearthed in the heart of fire and stone? Here is Act 1 of Ancient Dragons, Echoes of Zagros. The Zagros Mountains clawed at the Mesopotamian sky, a jagged spine of ancient rock piercing veils of swirling mist. Here time moved differently, measured not in the decrees of lowland kings but in the slow grind of stone. The howl of winds carving relentless paths through stone teeth, and the deep, unsettling silence that swallowed sound whole. Sunlight, when it breached the perpetual haze, seemed thinner, colder, illuminating a landscape both breathtakingly beautiful and profoundly dangerous. Steep slopes plunged into shadowed valleys where rivers snaked like quicksilver, fed by snowmelt and secrets held close within the Earth's core. This was a frontier, a place where the ordered world of cities and ziggurats frayed, giving way to older powers, wilder spirits, and legends that clung like persistent lichen to the sheer rock faces, whispering of terrors that slept fitfully in the highest, most inaccessible reaches. It was a place that bred resilience in its inhabitants and caution, bordering on dread, in outsiders who dared venture beyond the familiar plains. Into this volatile realm rode Ashur, a cartographer and scout in service to the expanding ambitions of Ashur, the city-state that shared his name. His task was grimly practical: map the treacherous passes vital for trade and military movement, and assess the truth behind the disruptive local myths disrupting vital tribute routes. He arrived at the village of Kār-i-Ātash, finds not rustic tranquility, but the raw aftermath of panic. Huts bore strange, blackened scorch marks inconsistent with any normal fire. A palpable fear permeated the air, thick as the smoke still curling from a smoldering sheep pen. Villagers huddled, eyes wide with remembered horror, their faces etched with a primal dread that Ashur, a man of calculations and measured lines, found deeply unsettling. He saw the physical destruction, the tangible evidence of something violent, having passed through, but his pragmatic mind immediately began searching for logical inconsistencies within the brewing storm of superstition gathered in the largest remaining dwelling. Ashur listened patiently as the village elder, his voice trembling like dry leaves, recounted the visitation. The narrative was punctuated by the authoritative pronouncements of a visiting priest from the lowlands, his robe stark against the rustic setting. They spoke of the Kār-i-Ātash, the skyfire drake, a creature of impossible scale, winged and terrible, descending from Mount Zagros's shrouded peaks. It breathed fire hotter than any forge, they claimed, its passage heralded by earth tremors, its eyes burning with divine fury. The priest emphasized its role as an instrument of wrath against impiety, its hoard of stolen jewels glittering in a high, cursed lair. Ashur noted the embellishments, the contradictions, the way the story shifted with each telling, growing grander, more demonic. Have you heard tales like these in your own lands? Legends born from the fear of the unknown? Tell us in the comments below. This fear, Ashur recognized, was a powerful force, perhaps more dangerous than any real predator lurking in the peaks. Standing apart, near the entrance where the mountain wind tugged at her woven shawl, was Soraya. Her presence was quiet but rooted, her gaze fixed not on the priest's dramatic gestures but on the distant mist-shrouded mountain itself. Ashur marked her stillness, the subtle tension in her posture as the priest condemned the mountain and its supposed demon. She belonged here, her lineage tied to these slopes for generations beyond counting, possessor of a different kind of knowledge, one not found in lowland temple scrolls. He sensed a flicker of dissent in her dark eyes, a hint that the terrifying narrative being spun was, to her, incomplete, perhaps even dangerously wrong. Her connection felt intuitive, ancient, a stark contrast to his own methodical skepticism demanded by his training, and his empire's relentless push for order and understanding through measurement and logical deduction. He wondered what stories her people told when the priests weren't listening. Ashur's mind worked constantly, comparing the frantic tales to his directives from Ashur. The Assyrian lords cared little for mountain spirits, except when they disrupted the flow of resources or necessitated costly military escorts. His mission was clear: debunk the myth, identify the true cause, bandits, rival tribes, geological phenomena, and restore predictable passage. Yet, the physical evidence he'd seen, the peculiar scorch patterns, the sheer scale of the destruction hinted at by the villagers' terror, gnawed at his innate skepticism. He mentally reviewed known predators, geological hazards, even the possibility of sophisticated deception by hostile mountain clans using fire or crude explosives. None fully explained the specific details, the intensity of the fear, the almost personal malevolence attributed to the Drake. There was a dissonance here, a gap between superstition and the tangible clues that his rational mind couldn't yet bridge, fueling a nascent curiosity alongside his duty. The attacks, the elder explained, were not isolated, though this was the most brazen, striking so close to the village center. Livestock had vanished from high pastures for months. Shepherds spoke of fleeting shadows against the moon, strange rumbling sounds preceding misfortune. Trade caravans taking the higher passes reported unsettling occurrences, fueling the legends further south and west, making recruitment of guards difficult and expensive. The region's instability grew with each incident, attributed wholesale to the Kār-i-Ātash. The priest used this growing fear to consolidate his influence, demanding greater tithes for appeasement rituals, weaving the mountain's inherent dangers into a tapestry of divine judgment that served the lowland temple's authority. Ashur saw the pattern: fear breeding superstition, superstition exploited for control, while the underlying cause remained obscured, potentially festering, growing bolder in the mountain's shadow, ignored by rational inquiry until it became undeniable. Then came the break, the anomaly that cracked the smooth surface of the accepted myth. A young shepherd, found half-mad with terror hiding in a ravine, didn't just babble about fire and wings. Through broken gasps, he spoke of a choking, chemical stench that burned his lungs, accompanying the searing heat. He insisted the monstrous form he glimpsed was impossibly fast, yes, but moving on the ground, crashing through scree and brush with terrifying power, not soaring serenely like the legends described. He mentioned no horde, no divine pronouncements, only overwhelming, unnatural power and a suffocating odor unlike anything known. Separately, while scouting a promising pass higher up, near a cluster of steaming sulphur vents reeking of rotten eggs, Ashur himself found something that made the hairs on his neck prickle. A single track, impossibly large, pressed deep into hardened mud, clearly reptilian, three-toed yet utterly alien to the known fauna of the region. Ashur knelt beside the track, his usual methodical detachment replaced by a growing sense of profound unease. The sheer size was staggering, larger than any crocodile or monitor lizard he could conceive of existing in these mountains. The impression was deep, suggesting immense weight. Near the edge of the track, almost overlooked, lay a fragment, a thick iridescent scale, hard as baked clay, catching the thin light with an oily sheen. It felt cool, almost metallic to the touch, utterly unlike the scales of mundane serpents or lizards. He bagged it carefully, his mind racing. The shepherd's account of the chemical smell, the ground-based movement, this colossal track near a geothermal vent. These disparate pieces pointed away from a simple myth or a known animal. They hinted at something else, something disturbingly real and deeply strange, thriving in the geologically active heart of the Zagros. The discovery, whispered through the fearful village, did not calm anxieties but ignited them further. The lowland priest seized upon the shepherd's tale and Ashur's disturbing find, not as evidence contradicting the myth, but as proof of the drake's evolving, insidious nature. He declared the creature's demonic intelligence, its earthly manifestation, a sign of deeper corruption. A grand appeasement was needed, he proclaimed, his voice ringing with fervent authority, hinting darkly at the necessity of a significant, perhaps even human, sacrifice to placate the mountain's fury and cleanse the land. Ashur saw the dangerous precipice they stood upon, fear spiraling into fanaticism, reason drowned out by fervent belief. Soraya, observing the priest's manipulation and the growing fervor in the villagers' eyes, recognized the perilous deviation from the cautious respect her ancestors held for the mountain's true powers, a path leading only to more suffering. A choice solidified within Ashur, sharp and clear amidst the rising hysteria. His mission objectives remained, but were now overshadowed by a burning need to uncover the tangible truth behind the Kār-i-Ātash. Duty, skepticism, and a burgeoning, almost unwilling sense of awe propelled him. He would ascend Mount Zagros, follow the clues, and confront whatever reality lurked behind the veil of myth, if only to counter the dangerous tide of fanaticism. He announced his intention to scout the higher peaks directly, framing it as necessary reconnaissance. Unbeknownst to him, Soraya, watching him prepare, made her own silent vow. She knew paths the lowlanders could never find, recognized signs they would ignore. She would follow, or perhaps intercept him, guide him if she must, not just to protect him from the mountain's mundane dangers, but to steer him towards the real heart of the mystery, the truth her ancestors understood, and that the priest sought to bury under layers of demonic fable. The ascent into the echo chamber of myth had begun. The ascent began under a sky the color of hammered pewter, the air thinning rapidly as Ashur and Soraya left the last vestiges of the foothills behind. The path, often little more than a goat track clinging precariously to sheer slopes, wound ever upward into the mountain's brooding silence. Ashur, meticulous even in peril, sketched the terrain, noting geological strata, potential ambush points, and the direction of strange warm breezes that carried the faint taint of sulphur. Soraya moved with an unnerving grace born of familiarity, her eyes constantly scanning, reading the language of disturbed stones, bent grasses, and the flight patterns of high-altitude birds. She pointed out ancient cairns, almost invisible against the scree, markers left by her ancestors. She spoke hesitantly at first, sharing fragmented lore not of a winged demon, but of powerful earth-shakers, immense beings tied to the fire veins deep within the mountain, creatures demanding respect and distance, not sacrifice. Her words painted a picture less of outright malice, more of colossal, indifferent power intertwined with the land itself. Their journey became a descent into a world increasingly alien and volatile. They traversed landscapes scarred by ancient lava flows now colonized by hardy strange flora, crimson mosses clinging to basalt, skeletal trees bleached white by mineral-laden springs. Geothermal activity grew more pronounced. Bubbling mud pots hissed in hidden depressions. Steam billowed from fissures in the rock face, and the ground itself sometimes felt unnervingly warm beneath their feet. Ashur's scientific curiosity warred with a primal sense of caution. He meticulously documented the vents and mineral deposits, recognizing the potential for sudden eruptions or gas releases. Soraya navigated these areas with ingrained knowledge, warning him away from unstable ground or zones where the air shimmered ominously, whispering about places the earth-shakers favored, areas her people had learned over generations to avoid entirely. The mountain felt alive, breathing heat and menace. Evidence accumulated, painting a confusing, contradictory picture that both fueled Ashur's investigation and deepened the mystery. In a shallow cave, its entrance almost hidden by a rockfall, they found not treasure chests, but walls glittering, with vast seams of pyrite, fool's gold, catching the torchlight like 1,000 unblinking eyes. Could this be the source of the Horde legend, misinterpreted by desperate caravan survivors? Higher still, weathering out of a cliff face, Ashur identified the unmistakable fossilized bones of large pterosaurs, relics from an unimaginable past. He wondered aloud if ancient sightings of these long-extinct flyers, distorted by time and fear, had contributed the wings to the Kār-i-Ātash myth. These discoveries offered rational explanations for parts of the legend, yet felt insufficient to explain the sheer terror, the scorch marks, or the colossal track Ashur had found. Adding another layer of complexity, they stumbled upon the undeniable ruins of ancient human habitation far higher than seemed feasible. Collapsed stone foundations, remnants of terraced fields clinging to steep slopes, pottery shards of an unfamiliar design. Who had lived here so close to the volatile heart of the mountain? They seemed contemporary with, or perhaps even older than, the pterosaur fossils Ashur recognized, suggesting an immense antiquity. There were no signs of violence, merely abandonment. Soraya recognized some symbols etched faintly on stones, connecting them to the oldest strata of her people's fragmented oral history, tales of those who came before, who understood the mountain's deepest secrets before fading away. This lost civilization added another ghost to the landscape, another silent question mark hanging heavy in the thin, cold air. What did they know? And why did they leave? The mountain chose its own moment for a more direct revelation. While traversing a narrow ledge overlooking a deep, mist-filled chasm, the ground beneath them shuddered violently. A low, terrifying groan echoed up from the depths, not geological but guttural, resonant. The tremor intensified, rock splintering overhead. A section of the opposite cliff face groaned and sheared away, plunging into the abyss below, briefly clearing the mist. In that heart-stopping instant, illuminated by a flicker of geothermal light from the newly exposed fissure, they glimpsed it. Not wings, but a vast, segmented tail, armored in scales like obsidian plates, whipping past with impossible speed. A wave of suffocating heat washed over them, carrying that same sharp, caustic chemical stench the shepherd had described, burning their throats and eyes. Then only the roar of falling rock and a bellowing echo fading into the depths remained, leaving them clinging to the ledge, hearts pounding, united in shared visceral terror. Ashur's skepticism shattered completely, replaced by a chilling certainty. Whatever lived in these mountains was no mere animal, no simple misinterpretation. It was colossal, powerful, and possessed a defense mechanism unlike anything recorded in the annals of Assyrian knowledge. The chemical stench, the intense heat accompanying its passage, it pointed towards a biological process horrifyingly effective and utterly alien. Soraya, though equally terrified, showed a flicker of grim recognition. The sound, the smell, they matched the most dire warnings passed down from her grandmother, descriptions of the Earthshaker's true power when provoked or disturbed by shifts in the fire veins. They both understood now that the creature or creatures were inextricably linked to the mountain's volatile geology, perhaps drawn to it, sustained by it, or even influencing it in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. The stakes had escalated dramatically. They weren't just investigating a myth. They were trespassing in the domain of something primeval. Their peril intensified, as they discovered unsettling signs of other human presence in these remote heights. Not the lost civilization, but recent traces. Oddly constructed warning totems made of bones and dark stones placed near certain cave mouths. Tracks of hunters shod in unfamiliar hide boots deliberately avoiding the geothermal zones. Were these nomadic tribes who knew more than Soraya's settled people, or guardians of a dangerous secret? Compounding their danger, news reached them via a furtive shepherd, sympathetic to Soraya's lineage. The lowland priest had denounced them, both as heretics, blaming them for inciting the mountain's wrath. Fanatical warriors fueled by religious fervor and promises of divine favor were ascending the mountain, tasked with capturing them or silencing them permanently. They were now hunted by both the mountain's ancient mysteries and the modern world's zealous intolerance. Driven by the closing net of pursuit and the burning need for answers, Ashur focused his mapping skills while Soraya drew upon the deepest strata of her ancestral memory, guided by the subtle clues her grandmother had taught her to recognize. The alignment of certain peaks, the behavior of specific thermals, the unique mineral coloring around stable cave entrances. They pushed deeper into a region Soraya's people normally shunned, a labyrinth of eroded canyons and steam-shrouded crags. It felt like penetrating a sacred, forbidden zone. The air grew heavier, the geothermal activity more intense, but strangely localized, channeled through specific fissures and caves. They moved with heightened senses, aware that every shadow could hold danger, every rumble could herald disaster, either from the earth below or the fanatics tracking them from behind. The tension stretched taut between them, a mixture of fear, reliance, and unspoken questions about the path ahead. Finally, guided by a combination of Ashur's precise calculations of trajectory from the earlier rockfall and Soraya's intuition about a specific rock formation resembling an ancient symbol from her lore, they found it. Tucked beneath an immense, weathered overhang partially concealed by centuries of erosion and hardy mountain shrubs, was an entrance unlike the others. It led not to a simple cave, but to a deliberately constructed rock shelter. A man-made space merged seamlessly with the natural rock. Inside, protected from the elements, the air thick with the dust of ages, were carvings. Sophisticated, detailed, and undeniably ancient, they covered the walls. Ashur held his torch aloft, his breath catching in his throat. Soraya gasped, recognizing the style as belonging to the mythical, those who came before. The carvings depicted giant, powerful, ground-dwelling reptiles interacting with geothermal vents. The revelations hit them with the force of a physical blow. The carvings showed these immense creatures, unmistakably the same type of beast whose track Ashur found, whose tail they glimpsed, basking near fire vents, sometimes being hunted cautiously by small human figures armed with spears, other times depicted with a kind of reverence, figures bowing towards them from a distance. Crucially, none were depicted with wings. The fire was consistently shown erupting near the creatures' mouths in proximity to steaming fissures in the ground, suggesting an interaction, not an inherent biological flame originating solely from the beast. This was the truth, preserved in stone. A real species known and understood by a forgotten culture, its existence tied to the Earth's heat, its legend later twisted into the demonic Kār-i-Ātash. The midpoint had been reached. The nature of their quest and the history of the mountain had irrevocably shifted, but the true horror is yet to unfold. Stay with us. The path revealed by the ancient carvings led downwards, into the very bowels of Mount Zagros. It was less a passage, more a wound in the rock, descending into oppressive heat and humidity that clung like a shroud. The air grew thick, saturated with the sharp tang of sulphur and that other, more complex chemical scent, the signature of the hidden giants, now becoming an almost constant presence. Water trickled down walls coated in bizarre, vividly colored mineral deposits, glowing faintly under the light of Ashur's carefully shielded torch. Strange, resonant clicks echoed from unseen depths, mingling with the constant low thrum of the Earth's troubled sleep. Ashur felt his surveyor's detachment straining against a rising tide of primal apprehension, while Soraya moved with a tense reverence, whispering fragmented prayers her grandmother had taught her, pleas for passage, through a realm her people had long learned to fear and respect from afar. This was the heart of the fire veins, the sanctum of the earth-shakers. Deeper they went into a labyrinth sculpted by heat and time. Bioluminescent fungi cast eerie, shifting patterns of blue and green light across vast chambers, revealing ecosystems utterly alien to the surface world. Pale, eyeless insects scuttling across damp rock, strange ferns thriving in the superheated steam near fissures. The sheer pressure of the mountain above felt immense, a crushing weight on the spirit. Ashur marveled at the geological forces at play, the raw power shaping this subterranean world. Yet every shadow seemed to flicker with unseen movement. Every rumble of the earth felt like a deliberate warning. Soraya recognized certain formations, described in the oldest parts of her tribal lore, places associated with immense danger and power, points where the veil between the deep earth and the surface world was thinnest. She touched a smooth, obsidian-like wall, feeling the vibrations, her expression a mixture of deep-seated fear and profound, unwilling connection to this place. Finally, the narrow passage opened dramatically into a cavern of breathtaking scale, a subterranean world unto itself. Far below, fissures glowed with the sullen red light of magma, casting flickering demonic shadows upwards. Steam vents hissed violently, creating swirling pillars of mist that danced in the hellish light. And there, illuminated by this primordial glow, they saw them. Not one, but several colossal forms moved with ponderous grace across the cavern floor. The Dracorex, Zagrosi, immense reptilian, their hides a mosaic of dark, iridescent scales that seemed to drink the light. Powerful limbs carried bodies 15, perhaps 20 feet long, culminating in heavy, wedge-shaped skulls and thick, muscular tails that swept across the rock. They were magnificent, terrifying, creatures torn from the deepest strata of prehistory. Alive and thriving in this hidden geothermal sanctuary, Ashur froze, his breath catching, overwhelmed by the sheer impossibility made real before him. They watched, hidden behind a curtain of steaming mineral deposits, as the creatures interacted. Two males engaged in a territorial dispute, bellowing, resonant challenges that shook the very air, displaying inflatable throat sacs shimmering with strange colors in the dim light. Their movements were surprisingly agile for their bulk, navigating the uneven terrain with powerful clawed feet. Then, cornered near a large sulphur vent, one Dracorex defensively sprayed a volatile, oily substance from glands near its jaw towards its rival. The stream hit the superheated gas rising from the vent and ignited instantly with a loud whoosh, creating a directed burst of brilliant, orange-white flame and thick, acrid smoke. It was sudden, shocking, and undeniably the source of the fire-breathing legend, a biological defense mechanism interacting lethally with the unique environment. The targeted creature recoiled, momentarily blinded and choking, before retreating. In that moment of violent revelation, all the pieces clicked into place for Ashur and Soraya. The Kār-i-Ātash wasn't a supernatural demon, but a biological marvel, a relict archosauriform that had survived the ages in this isolated, geothermally active niche. Its hoard was the natural glitter of pyrite and crystals lining its lair. Its fire was a chemical defense, weaponized by the volcanic vents it frequented. Its association with earthquakes stemmed from its sensitivity to the seismic instability of its habitat, perhaps even its movements triggering minor tremors or preceding larger ones as it reacted to geological stress. The forgotten ancestors depicted in the hidden shrine hadn't feared a monster. They had understood, respected, and perhaps even cautiously managed their coexistence with a real, immensely powerful animal perfectly adapted to its unique, dangerous world. The current myth was a degraded echo, a tapestry woven from fear, lost knowledge, and perhaps deliberate obfuscation. The weight of the discovery pressed down on Ashur, fundamentally altering his perception of reality. The ordered world of Assyrian maps and logic felt fragile, incomplete against the backdrop of this deep time and hidden biology. Awe warred with terror. The universe was far older, stranger, and more wondrously lethal than he had ever conceived. Soraya felt a different kind of weight, the profound vindication of her ancestors' fragmented whispers, the immense responsibility of knowing the truth, and a fierce protective fear for these incredible creatures, the last of their kind, vulnerable despite their power. This fragile ecosystem, this hidden sanctuary, felt sacred. The raw power of nature revealed, hidden beneath layers of myth. If this glimpse into the unknown fascinates you, share this journey with others who appreciate ancient mysteries. They understood the danger this truth posed. Exposure could mean extermination, ordered by the very civilization Ashur served. Their quiet contemplation shattered as harsh shouts and the flare of crude oil torches erupted from the passage they'd used. The fanatics had arrived. Led by the zealous village priest himself, his eyes burning with righteous fury, they burst into the cavern, chanting prayers for protection against demonic influence. Their arrival was a jarring desecration, loud, aggressive, ignorant. Seeing the colossal reptiles moving in the geothermal haze, their fear instantly curdled into violent conviction. The priest pointed a trembling finger, screaming accusations proclaiming the creatures as the fiends of legend, demanding their destruction in the name of his god. The fragile peace of the ancient sanctuary was irrevocably broken by the intrusion of modern fear and dogma. Chaos exploded within the cavern. The fanatics, armed with spears and crude swords, charged recklessly towards the nearest Dracorex, their war cries echoing bizarrely in the vast space. The creatures, startled and enraged by the sudden intrusion and aggression, responded with terrifying speed and power. Bellows turned from challenges to roars of fury. One massive reptile swept its tail, sending fanatics scattering like broken dolls. Another unleashed its fiery chemical spray, not towards a vent this time, but directly at its attackers, the volatile compounds causing horrific burns and panic, even without widespread ignition. The air filled with screams, the clash of metal on super-hard scales, the roar of enraged primordial beasts, and the ominous rumble of the disturbed earth beneath their feet as the conflict shook the cavern's delicate stability. Ashur and Soraya were caught in the maelstrom. Survival instincts took over. Ashur used his knowledge of the terrain, pulling Soraya behind rock formations, dodging falling debris shaken loose by the battle's vibrations. Soraya's ingrained understanding of the creature's likely movements and the cavern's hazards helped them navigate the deadly chaos. They saw the priest, consumed by his fanaticism, lead a doomed charge directly towards the largest Dracorex. A critical moment arose. Their escape route was partially blocked by panicked fanatics and an enraged creature. Ashur noticed a section of the ceiling, heavy with unstable mineral formations directly above the main path of conflict. A well-aimed strike with a loose rock, amplified by the cavern's inherent instability. It could trigger a massive rockfall, potentially sealing the cavern, stopping the fanatics, protecting the creatures, but also burying the evidence forever, and perhaps trapping themselves or others. Before Ashur could fully weigh the desperate gamble, the decision was torn from his hands. The priest, reaching the largest Dracorex, plunged his spear towards its eye. The creature reared, letting out a deafening roar, and slammed its massive head downwards. The impact was sickening, final. The fanatics faltered, their leader suddenly gone. In that moment of horrified hesitation, Ashur grabbed Soraya's arm, spotting a narrow side fissure partly obscured by steam, a path shown on the ancient carvings as an emergency exit. They scrambled towards it, ignoring the remaining chaos, the sounds of the creatures driving the terrified survivors back. They plunged into the darkness of the fissure, just as a larger tremor shook the cavern, sending cascades of rock down near the main entrance, the sounds of the subterranean battle, slowly fading behind them into muffled roars and crumbling stone. They were alive, but the confrontation had exacted a terrible price, leaving them breathless, hearts pounding with adrenaline, terror, and the profound, unsettling weight of the secret they now carried out of the mountain's fiery heart. They emerged from the fissure miles down the slope, staggering into the thin, cold light of a false dawn, blinking against the sudden expanse of sky. The oppressive heat and sulphur stench of the deep earth slowly yielded to the sharp, clean scent of high-altitude pine and damp rock. Behind them, the mountain remained, impassive and silent, guarding its secrets once more. The echoes of roaring, chaos, shattering rock and human screams faded, replaced by the ringing silence in their ears and the frantic thudding of their own hearts. They collapsed onto a patch of hardy grass, lungs aching, limbs trembling uncontrollably from adrenaline's aftermath. Cuts and bruises throbbed. The immediate overwhelming feeling was not triumph, but a profound hollow exhaustion mixed with the chilling clarity of survival against impossible odds. The ghosts of the cavern, both human and reptilian, haunting the edges of their vision. The weight of what they had witnessed settled upon them slowly, heavier than fatigue. They carried the knowledge of a living prehistory, a biological reality far stranger and more magnificent than any mythmaker could conceive. Ashur, the pragmatist, the man of lines and measures, found his worldview irrevocably fractured. The neat categories of the known world, animal, monster, natural phenomenon, blurred into insignificance before the reality of the Dracorex Zagrosi. He wrestled silently with the implications, the fallibility of human knowledge, the vast undiscovered depths of the natural world, and the terrible power wielded by ignorance and fanaticism. The Assyrian Empire, with its legions and meticulous records, suddenly seemed profoundly small against the scale of deep time embodied by those creatures and the forgotten civilization that had understood them. How could he report this? What words could contain such a truth without condemning it? Soraya felt a different burden. The fragmented stories of her ancestors now coalesced into a coherent, awesome, and terrifying whole. She felt an intense connection to the creatures, not as gods or demons, but as integral parts of the mountain's sacred, dangerous balance. A balance violently disrupted. She carried the grief for the fanatics, misguided and consumed by fear, but also a burning responsibility towards the earthshakers and the memory of those who came before. The knowledge was a sacred trust, yet profoundly dangerous. Sharing. It carelessly could lead to the creature's annihilation, hunted down as monsters or exploited as curiosities. Keeping it entirely secret felt like a betrayal of the ancestors who had left their warnings carved in stone, and left her own people vulnerable to the manipulations of fearmongers like the lowland priest. The path forward was shrouded in uncertainty. Their journey back down the mountain was subdued, marked by long silences punctuated by necessary, practical exchanges. The shared trauma and the immensity of their secret forged a bond between them, deeper than words, built on mutual reliance and unspoken understanding. They knew what the other had seen, felt the same awe and terror, wrestled with the same impossible choices. Ashur saw in Soraya not just a guide, but the inheritor of a wisdom his civilization had forgotten or perhaps never possessed. Soraya saw in Ashur not an invader, but someone whose encounter with the mountain's truth had stripped away arrogance, leaving behind a core of stunned integrity. They were co-conspirators now, bound by the hidden life throbbing within Mount Zagros, forever changed by their descent into the echo chamber of myth. As they neared the foothills, the question of Ashur's report loomed large. He could not lie outright. His duty and ingrained habit forbade it. But the full truth? It was too dangerous, too unbelievable, too potentially catastrophic for the creatures themselves. He considered his words carefully, weighing duty against consequence. He would report the discovery of significant unrecorded geological instability in the higher regions, confirming the presence of large, unidentified predators whose aggressive behavior was likely linked to this instability and posed a serious threat to passage. He would emphasize the danger, recommending avoidance and perhaps suggesting the local myths, while exaggerated, stemmed from genuine peril. It was a partial truth, enough to fulfill his mission's core requirements for safety and strategic assessment, while omitting the most world-altering details: the chemical fire, the sheer scale, the explicit link to a surviving prehistoric species. Soraya too considered her path. Returning to Kār-i-Ātash, she knew she couldn't simply declare the Kār-i-Ātash a biological reality tied to geothermal vents. The priest's influence, though perhaps shaken by the disastrous expedition, would twist her words, brand her a heretic collaborating with mountain demons. Instead, she would work subtly, patiently. She would begin reintroducing the old stories, the fragments her grandmother taught her, tales emphasizing respect for the mountain's unpredictable power, the wisdom of avoiding certain zones, interpreting the signs of the earth, portraying the great creatures not as inherently evil, but as immense forces of nature demanding caution and distance. She would plant seeds of the ancestral knowledge, hoping to slowly erode the foundation of fear upon which the demonic myth and the priest's power were built, fostering resilience through understanding, not blind faith or sacrifice. Their paths diverged at the edge of the settled lands. Ashur would head south, back towards the ordered world of Ashur, carrying his carefully worded report and the heavy secret of the Treacherous. His maps would be accurate in their lines, but profoundly incomplete in their soul. He knew he would forever look at mountains, at legends, at the very ground beneath his feet, with different eyes forever marked by the fire veins of Zagros. Soraya turned back towards Kār-i-Ātash and the looming peaks, her burden perhaps heavier, her task generational. She carried the faint hope that true knowledge, carefully nurtured, could eventually displace the terror, allowing her people to coexist, albeit fearfully and respectfully, with the immense power dwelling in the heights, as those who came before once did. The pursuit of hidden truths, peeling back layers of myth to glimpse forgotten realities, is a journey without end. If exploring these deep mysteries resonates with you, consider liking this video to support the quest for knowledge. The Kār-i-Ātash would likely remain a whispered legend in the Zagros and beyond, a convenient explanation for misfortune, a tool for those who wield fear. The fanatics who survived the cavern, if any, would return with tales confirming the demonic narrative, their terror reinforcing the myth's grip. Yet, the truth now had guardians. Ashur's cautious report might subtly steer official policy towards avoidance rather than confrontation. Soraya's quiet efforts might slowly rekindle ancestral wisdom within her community. The Treacherous Zagrosi, deep within their geothermal sanctuary, possibly sealed off by the rockfall, faced an uncertain future. Their existence, a fragile secret, held against the relentless pressures of the changing world above and the volatile earth below. There was no neat resolution, only the lingering echo of discovery and the uneasy truce between myth and reality. Ashur paused miles away, turning his horse for one last look at the distant Zagros range, now softened by distance but no less imposing under the Mesopotamian sun. The peaks seemed to watch him, ancient and knowing. He reached into his satchel, his fingers closing around the single iridescent scale he had salvaged from the mud beside that impossible track. It felt cool and smooth against his skin, a tangible fragment of a world hidden beneath the surface of his own, a potent reminder of the vast, humbling mysteries that lie dormant under the crust of accepted knowledge. It was proof, heavy in his hand, proof of wonders and terrors far exceeding human understanding, proof that some legends cast shadows rooted in truths too immense, too strange, to be easily believed, let alone controlled. The scale seemed to pulse faintly with captured light, a cold fire mirroring the hidden geothermal heart of the mountains. He held on to it, a secret connection to the deep time he had brushed against, a silent acknowledgement of the power that slept beneath the myths. The wind carried the faint scent of dust and distance, but in his mind, he could almost smell the sulphur and the sharp, chemical tang of the Earthshaker's breath. The terror remained, yes, but now intertwined with an undeniable thread of awe, a profound shift in the landscape of his soul. He turned his horse south towards the world of men and empires, leaving the echoes of Zagros to reverberate in the silence, forever guarding their primeval secret in fire and stone.